New Vision shows more of the violence plaguing the complex. This is Monday morning last week. A fight on the top floor erupts between two men, quickly spiralling out of control. Moments later, one attempted to flee from police. It's chaos that young children are being exposed to. Bare feet at a complex where syringes aren't a rare sight. Residents say what you're hearing here is a tenant smashing a sledgehammer against the floor. For tenants like Jacqueline, who are just trying to do the right thing and get on with their lives, the situation here has become so bad they've applied to leave the complex.
Hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode or a discussion on Perth Dialogues channel. Recently, I've come across this issue very close to us in WA, which is facing, which the community is facing, and it has got repercussions across WA because this issue, which is the Inglewood social housing in Inglewood, that plan or that model is being replicated across WA. So I think, and many people think, that the issues that Inglewood is facing today might happen in other places as well. So I think it's a very relevant topic. Another factor to build in is that the government is there to speak for the social housing tenants. And the not-for-profit sector people are there to speak about tenant as well. And then the police and Department of Communities are there to speak about their point of view. But there's no one to talk about the community members itself. The community members have to speak up on their own, have to manage their way through all the challenges and maze of bureaucracy and rules to get their voice heard. So I have, and Melissa, our guest today, has very kindly agreed to come on the show and talk about all things coherently from the community point of view, because we need to understand this whole issue in entirety, at least from community point of view. So thank you, Melissa, for joining us, and thank you for giving your time.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for inviting me on, and and having the chance to talk about this situation that we have happening in our neighbourhood.
Thank you. So, as I said, this issue and the point of views of different stakeholders is scattered around in the news and videos. So let's start from the start, and would you like to give the listeners and viewers just a gist of what's happening there? Can you just paint a picture of this social housing started a year ago? So maybe you can start maybe 1.5 years ago and say that was the community and the picture, and then how things have changed in the last 1 year.
Yeah. So in 2023, a complex of 24 single units came up for sale. It was privately owned. At the time, those 24 units were housed by regular, hardworking people like ourselves. The property was then sold to government. Government purchased it for quite a substantially large amount of money, and those tenants were then evicted, and because they were using that for social housing. So, which is, we need more social housing. And Inglewood has always had social housing. This is not a new concept for our area. We've always had around 5% social housing. That has obviously increased in the last couple of years as well. So it's not a new concept for us. So about 12 months ago, we just started to notice that there were different kinds of people in our communities walking around the streets that weren't known to us, that just didn't feel like they were, probably members of our community. It started with a mum being run off the road by some thugs that had broken into her car. She smashed through a neighbour's fence into their yard where their small children were playing. And from there, we kind of put together a community group because there was so many other people that were having the same thoughts. So the unit block was tenanted with 24, social housing tenants. The biggest issue for us was that it was made 100% social housing. So we all know, for those of you who have grown up in Perth, we all know the destruction that 100% social housing units cause. Brownlee Towers over in Bentley is a prime example of that. Drugs, alcohol, poor behaviour, terrible things happening over there, and that was eventually closed down. So we kind of felt that Inglewood, that specific complex, was going in that same direction. So what we did uncover was that a lot of the tenants that were put into the unit complex were those that had really high complex issues, a lot of drug and alcohol addiction issues. Some of them had been homeless and so had come from the streets, which is great. It's great that those people have found somewhere to live, because everyone deserves a roof over their heads. But I really feel like a lot of those people had come out of, places like St. Bart's, from the streets, and they were kind of put into, here's your new house. And the government just expected that these people were going to assimilate into our area, and that was not the case. So there was no wraparound services for these people. They were basically popped in here and were left to their own avail, and the crime skyrocketed. People's houses were broken into, their cars were vandalised, cars were stolen. Uber drivers refused to drop food there because they were beaten and their cars were stolen. One of the Uber drivers was hospitalised. People going for morning runs were chased down Beaufort Street with kitchen knives. Someone was bludgeoned with a fire extinguisher. There was an attack on a local community member in the car park. The list goes on. I could sit here for hours and tell you what has gone on. But, I think one of the biggest issues was just the drug paraphernalia left around. Inglewood is a community and a suburb that is for families, families, mum and dads with 2 or 3 kids and young kids. So we're really concerned because we don't want our children walking around streets and playgrounds and stuff where there's needles and stuff laying around. That was a really big issue for us. So that's kind of how it all started. And it's just it goes in waves. It gets better. People come and go. And then sometimes for whatever reason, it continues to fire off again. And it's been like that for the last 12 months.
Thank you for that initial picture. One of the things that I have noticed by reading all the news articles around this is that all the articles will say that the community is facing antisocial behaviour.
Yeah.
But in your presentations, you have said that the community is actually terrorized.
Yeah.
There's a long difference between these two descriptions.
Yes.
Where should the listeners sit and how should they understand this thing?
So I'll give you a personal example. It's 6:30 a.m. I'm walking down my street to go and get a morning coffee. And as I walk through the alleyway of 8th and 9th Avenue, where the 157 9th Avenue is located, which was always my morning walk, I would walk down and go through the alleyway, get my coffee after my walk and come home. I was verbally and racially abused, and someone threw a beer bottle at my head. And I won't tell you the words that they said because they're not appropriate for other people's ears. But that is just out of control. And, that's not an isolated incident. That would be what most of the community members would cop on a morning walk, to the point where we avoided going down those streets. We wouldn't let our kids go down 9th Avenue or in that vicinity, and we ourselves would avoid walking down or going anywhere near those areas. So when we talk about antisocial behaviour, I guess that is quite a big realm of a word, and it can incorporate many things, but it was the constant yelling, it's the constant screaming of people coming in from other suburbs that don't live here, that were going to visit people at the complex, that were then causing trouble. Huge increase in shop theft. So Coles and Woolworths are quite close in the vicinity. They've had to put security in, and they had to get more security throughout the day just to man those stores because of the increase of people stealing things. But just the bashings and the drug dealing and all of those things are incorporated in all of that, yeah. But there's just always fighting at the complex. There's always screaming. There's someone with a sledgehammer there that bangs the sledgehammer. I don't know what he bangs it against, but it's just constant. They have air horns. They're just really, not all of them, but there is some really unwell people in there that aren't getting the services that they need. And I think that's one of the biggest things for our communities. We have no problem with social housing. We've got no problem with people coming in and living in our neighbourhood. Why would you not want to come and live in Inglewood? It's beautiful. It's a gorgeous suburb to come and live in. But when you place people in a suburb like this that maybe they're not familiar with, and they aren't given the services and the help and support that they need, then that's the recipe for disaster, and that's what's happened here.
Yeah, it is interesting from my personal point of view, because when I was a kid, I used to live back in India, in an area where everyone was the same, like same economic status, and with the similar issues, fightings, abuses, domestic violence around the whole locality, which is not good for anyone who's looking to study. I was the first one to complete my engineering in my locality. No one reached that level. So I've seen those things, but I've seen issues where our next door suburb was 5 times richer than us. And then, so our locality became a starting point to go and do things in that locality. So I'm just trying to understand, where you said that it's 100% social housing. I would like to know, what does it means? And then probably if it's the same kind of people living in that housing society, they are the first one to bear all the negatives from these antisocial activities or terrorizing activities. How are they coping?
Yeah, so 100% social housing is interesting because it is an outdated policy that if in the last 12 months, I've read a lot of policy, I've listened to a lot of podcasts, I've listened to a lot of people, smart people who've worked in housing and globally worked in housing. And if you look at the pattern of what they say, they all agree that 100% social housing does not work. And they highly recommend countries not to use it. And it's interesting because before Inglewood 100% social housing, there weren't many other places around Perth that have 100% social housing. They are generally mixed tenure. And by mixed tenure, I mean 30% social housing, 70% either affordable or rent-to-buy housing. And so in this instance, they've put 100% social housing in there. And, and I could be wrong when I say this, but I don't believe that a lot of the tenants that they put into 157 are your common social housing type of person. The most don't go to work. They are on benefits, probably have been for a while. And I know that's a stereotype, and I don't mean any disrespect when I say that, but I feel like they've put a lot of complex people together in a very close vicinity in single unit, single bedroom units, with very serious issues, and they have not coped, and they're fighting amongst each other. It's territorial. It's, they're beating each other. So it's not so much that they're fighting with the neighbours in the outside world. They're also fighting with each other within the complex, because there's a handful of people in that complex who are great people and want to get on with their lives. And I speak to a couple of them that live in there, and they're studying and they're trying to get on with their lives. And, I think a lot of people get into social housing not for any fault of their own. It may just be the cards that they dealt, and, they got into a situation and then they were down on their luck. So it makes no difference where you've come from. But I really feel like there's a real entitlement around social housing, and there's a real lack of respect. It's a real entitlement to say, well, the government's going to give me somewhere to live, so I can do what I want, kind of thing. And I think that's the real mentality of some of the people in that complex, where they just honestly don't care. And it's like they've gone out of their way to make the community's life really unpleasant, and also the other people living in that complex. And that's obviously led to, some serious issues going on inside of there.
Two questions from that. One is that you said 100% social housing is not the norm in WA, but the government brought it in Inglewood. So how was the communication between the government and the community before putting it in? Was there a lot of consultations or talking or taking on board the suggestions of the community or the other stakeholders before doing this? Or it was, I'm in power, I'll do this, bear with this?
It's an excellent question. There was zero community consultation, and the government has made it that way that they don't have to tell communities that they're doing these things. We obviously knew through people that the government had purchased the complex, but there was zero community consultation. And I'll go a step further and say that the local council was not consulted either. They were not aware of this either. So when these things started happening, it was a massive shock to the community, and it was a massive shock to our local council as well, because they had not been notified of any of these things happening, which is a real concern, because it's completely unfair. It's unfair for the community, it's unfair for council, but it's also really unfair for the tenants in there that aren't, we're not aware that they're there. These things happen and we look like a bunch of complainers, but also to, the correct processes have not been followed, but the government has made it that way so they can do what they want without consultation and without, I guess, the pushback from communities, because communities like ours, like Inglewood, would have pushed back and we would have said, hey, we're not opposed to social housing, but why are we doing 100% here? I don't know that this is the right location for that. And I don't know that that's the right mix for those kind of, that type of tenant in our neighbourhood. Yeah.
Right. And the second part of this is that when the government or anyone tries to bring in 100% social housing, and obviously some of them will have high needs, someone will need support, and the government is there to speak for everyone, not just a section of the people. Did they think about designing that project properly, in sense of, we are putting these people, they need the support. So is there support services around that complex? Is there security from the government to manage the security around? Because you said there's drugs, there's needles thrown around. So is there that wraparound services around them which manages the community expectations, but also supports the tenant itself, that they can live on their life and then go out to maybe look for jobs or do something?
Yeah, so community consultation was not given. And I think when 100% social housing goes into communities, the government should be having consultation, at least with the councils, to say, hey guys, we're going to put some social housing in here. Regardless of whether they agree with it or not, but to at least consult with the council, so that then the council can put in, security measures and, monitoring and all of those kind of things. So when this happened, there's no security camera. So there was a security system in the unit complex when it was the complex, when it was privately owned, and that was still there, but it was not working when the government took it over. And because of privacy laws, the government chose not to reconnect that. So there was no CCT camera working on the property. When these things started to happen and the community started to push back, and we did a lot of meetings with Department of Communities, Department of Housing, the community ourselves, City of Stirling, police, these were the issues that we raised, that, you know, there's drug dealings going on. There's a prostitution ring running out of there. There is people coming and going. There's, you know, stolen goods. All of those things were happening. But there was no one monitoring any of this, and there was no CCT capturing any of it. There was no CCT in our local area either. So since us making a lot of noise and asking a lot of questions, there has been 2 cameras put in at the back of the complex, and the City of Stirling have now implemented or put in a permanent CCT camera on the corner of the alleyway and 9th Avenue now. So that's a permanent fixture. There was one that was run by the City of Stirling prior to that out the front of the complex, so that they could monitor, you know, the comings and goings of people and just public safety as they walk past. Yeah. And so when we talk about support, I don't believe there was enough support systems. I know there was a couple of tenants who were on NDIS, and they often had support and carers come on a daily basis. And what happened when those people were there is that the complex itself actually simmered down a little bit. I think having someone around on a daily basis just obviously helped people. And we found that while those NDS support workers were there on a daily basis, that lasted for about 3 months, the complex itself was pretty quiet. Once those services left and they weren't there on a daily basis, we noticed a massive increase in antisocial behaviour and people coming and going. So it's interesting. So a majority, you know, a percentage of the tenants have come from St. Bart's. Percentage of the tenants have come from jail, so from foundation housing. Some have come from the streets. They were homeless. And so some of those people that have come from St. Bart's, they've been in situations where they've had full wraparound services. They've been, you know, in a really cocooned environment where they've had all of the services to them. And it's a brilliant, brilliant program. And then they come and they've been put into 157. And then there's no more services. So I really feel like they kind of got let out of recovery early, if that makes sense, where they haven't quite been at the right point of transition to be then left to be on their own to do those things. So no, there's no wraparound services. And I think there's a real gap in this for the government to look at and say, hey, you know, we can put people in here, but there needs to be another program or company or organisation where they are then helping those people to transition into and out of, because that's been the real issue here, that they just haven't been supported. And if they do have those services, they're not using them. And I know that you can't force people to do that, but, you know, some of these issues are really serious, and we need to look at really supporting those people. And are they the right fit to be put into a community like this? You know, the other downside is that there is no screening of those tenants. Tenants aren't screened for, you know, for privacy, you know, and all of those things. And I understand and get that people need a house to live in and a roof over their heads. No one's questioning that. But I don't feel that the tenants that they placed in there, some of them, not all of them, were the right fit for a community like Inglewood, given the seriousness of the issues that they did have.
Again, 2 questions from that. One is that when you have all these tenants coming in from whatever source, St. Bart's or anyone, and they already had that wraparound services around them, and you take that off and you put them into a high value, or like, because it's Inglewood is a high cost living area, put them in there, no support services. Are we putting these people, setting them up for failing? Like, here you are, no support services, you're in a high cost living area, you're seeing all this, you know, people spending and living around and big cars, better cars, and your children are seeing all that, women are seeing all that. Are we setting up these people for failure now?
100%, 1,000% we're setting them up to fail. Yeah. And that's not good enough. You know, we live in Western Australia. We live in one of the richest, we live in the richest state in Australia. And we live in Australia, which is one of the richest countries in the world. We should not have these problems. But our government is failing these people, and it is failing the communities that they place them into by not giving them the support that they need. And, you know, Inglewood is a textbook example of that. You know, I think we really have to look at, you know, there's people that have come to me and said, hey, Mel, you know, we're thinking about leaving the area. We have just spent $1.4 million on our new home that we loved up the street from this complex, but we just can't deal with the late night screaming and the yelling and the people breaking into our cars. And we just don't want to raise our children in an environment like that. So they've sold and they've left and they've moved out of the community. And what that is going to do to our community is devastating, because those kids have now been taken out of school. Those parents have now moved somewhere else. They're going to be spending money somewhere else. But now someone else is going to come in and buy that house, maybe not knowing the issues that are going on in that, you know, location. And they're going to have paid more because, you know, house prices are going up by, you know, $5,000 a week. And they're going to be left with this. So it's just so unfair. And I think the biggest thing for us to look at, and it's something that people aren't talking about enough, is that all of this has been created by probably 10 individual people. 10 individual people have created absolute anarchy for our community, and the government has done nothing about it, and they've done nothing to help. They've created it, and they've not done anything to help and support us. And we have had to push so hard to get meetings and to have something of some sort done so that we can protect ourselves, but so those people in the complex are also protected.
The second question that I was referring to was that I read those news articles and they said there were 300 police call-outs in 6 months, possibly for these 10 tenants. So it's almost like 30 call-outs per person. But no one has been evicted from those housing. And my question is, and I was thinking about this thing, is that even if you evict them, you're not leaving that social housing house empty. There's 20,000 people waiting more. So you can screen good people who will fit in the community, who will value that I have got this social housing. The community is supporting me in living at a very subsidized rate. So I should give back to the community and make the community better. So there is no loss of housing for anyone. The community is happy. We don't spend on all these police resources being used to manage these 300 call-outs. What's missing? Why is the government not being able to take that good step and take these people out or take police actions and whatever?
The short answer is that the government has not built enough houses. They have been sitting around doing nothing for the last 9 years, and now all of a sudden there's this skyrocket of house prices and no one can afford to live anywhere. So that is increasing the amount of people going onto the wait list because they literally can't afford to rent anywhere and they can't afford to live anywhere. So this is just a simmering accumulation of people not doing enough. There has not been enough action in the last 8 years. There has not been enough action in building houses. And if you look as we come out, like if you look back and look as we came out of COVID, there was a huge amount of unit complexes and units itself in the Perth area. And they actually stopped building units because they were really worried that there weren't going to be enough tenants to be able to put into them. And so what happened was a lot of construction companies, they stopped building a lot of the unit complexes because there just wasn't the people to go into them. And then all of a sudden, COVID stopped. We opened our borders and let everybody in, and and all of a sudden everything's full, and now there's nowhere for these people to live, and these are the most vulnerable people in our communities. And so the government hasn't built enough houses. They have increased our population radically, and they have not prepared or planned for that. We obviously needed to, make some more money after, and many countries did, because we were closed down during COVID. It was incredibly costly for everyone. And so we needed to increase our population. We needed to increase our population for people with skilled migration, because we were growing at such a large capacity. So I understand why they've done it. But once again, this is a government that doesn't plan anything. They just think it's a great idea and go and do it. And then we, as the people, are the ones paying the price. And these vulnerable people and many members of other communities are the ones paying the price right now. Inglewood is a tiny little suburb. I think this area, there's 7,000 people, 7,900 people from memory in this suburb. We were the most policed neighbourhood in August of this year. We had nightly police helicopter flybys. There would be constantly police in our area. There was mounted police in our area, police cars and the City of Stirling security guys regularly doing laps around the neighbourhood, and people coming and going. So it's staggering and mind-blowing to think about the amount of money that this government has wasted on police resources. 306 call-outs in the last 6 months. It's now December, so I'd imagine that number's probably at 500 and something. That is a lot of manpower. It's a lot of man-hours. And the saddest thing about this is that these poor police haven't budgeted for this. They don't have the staff levels to do this. They haven't got the budgets to do this. And once again, no planning. We'll just put these people in here. We won't tell anyone about it. And then all of a sudden, everyone else has been bombarded with having to do all this work. It's so unfair. I feel incredibly sorry for the police. They have done an incredible job, but they are under-resourced. They don't have enough powers, and it's just a constant thing of coming back every day to the same problems and the same people, that there's no consequences for their actions. So it's alarming, and it's alarming to know. I mean, if we knew the figures of the money that has been wasted on these specific police call-outs, the damage to the units. I mean, I personally have seen 3 toilets go into that complex. I don't know how you break a toilet, but they were getting renewed. There is constantly maintenance people there all the time. Doors getting smashed, windows getting broken. It would be staggering to think of. It would be in the millions, probably 5 million. It's crazy. And, when we come back, it's just a handful of 10 people. Why would we not put these people into somewhere where they were getting the care and support that they needed, until that they had, managed to, get a little bit longer in life, and so that then put them into somewhere like this where that they're going to be okay. It's appalling. It's almost abusive, I think, from the government towards these tenants. And this is not an isolated.
So the next question what I have is that I've read all these news reports, and what basically it says that when you go to the police and police comes and deals with whatever the issues are, they say tenancy and other things are Department of Communities issue. And when you go to the Department of Communities, they say, we are doing whatever we can, but now this is a police issue. Can you work through this frustration of this bureaucratic ping pong while the actual issue is not being solved? The issue is still there.
It's incredibly frustrating. And it must be frustrating for the people working in these sectors and these departments. So the issue that we found was that if you go to the Department of Communities website, when these things happen, and I know a lot of the tenants were also doing that, and you can go and put a complaint in about loud noises or antisocial behaviour, or maybe drug and alcohol possession and things like that. And what we found was that there was a lot of community members doing those things, calling communities, Department of Housing, the offices of the Department for the Housing Minister, lots of different places. But I don't feel like they talk amongst themselves very much. And I feel like a lot of that information was not captured. And so what you have is that you've got the Minister for Housing who passes the buck to the Department of Housing. You then have the Department of Housing who passes the buck to the Department of Communities. And then the Department of Communities pass the buck to the police. And that's not fair, because it's not the police that put the people there. It's the Department of Communities through the Department of Housing. So I feel like there's not enough responsibility taken by those two government departments for the welfare of the people, of the tenants, their tenants. You will often hear our housing minister say, they're my tenants. He said that to me when I had a meeting with him. Okay, well, if I'm renting my property to someone, that person's my tenant. Would it be okay for me to be letting that person break things or create, horrible noises at night time that's upsetting other people, all of these things, hurting people, breaking things, that's not acceptable behaviour from a tenant in a regular, tenancy agreement. So why is it okay for tenants of social housing? And so with the tenancy agreement of social housing, there's what we call a 3-strike rule. The only way you can evict someone from social housing is through the 3-strike rule. And this is how the 3-strike rule works, because it's not set up for a community, it's set up for the tenant. If you have a strike, and a strike might be something like, drug possession, being arrested, assaulting another tenant, a whole range of different things. And you have to be convicted. You have to be convicted of that situation. If that happens 3 times within a 12-month period, then the department could look at the potential of using the 3-strike rule, if they choose to remove that problem tenant. So in the 12 months that this has been going on, I know of one case where that happened. So that specific tenant was evicted and moved somewhere else using the 3-strike policy. But I would have to say there would have been at least 100 to 200 complaints about that specific tenant just in that 6-month period. So what we're finding is a lot of information is going to the Department of Communities, but I don't believe that they hold any of that information. If they look into that situation or that issue and they work with police and there's no outcome for that, I'm pretty sure that just gets binned. It doesn't stay on someone's file. So then you go back to the drawing board. And when a new year ticks over, that slate's wiped clear. So then you would have to be another 3 strikes. So it's near impossible to have someone removed from social housing. And that's not what we want. We don't want people removed from their houses. We don't want people moved from their homes. Nobody wants that. That's horrible. But when you're dealing with people who should be probably in mental health situations where they need to be monitored on a daily basis, these are the issues that you're going to have. And there's a handful of people in there, probably not so much now, but at the start, that were so unwell, they should not have been walking the community of anyone's streets. They should have been in a mental health hospitalisation, whatever that is for them, so that they were getting the help that they needed, because they were not only a situation to the community, but they're a situation to themselves. And that was really concerning for us. And is what kind of led to us to push so much on these matters. We were privileged enough, I guess, to actually get a meeting with the housing minister. And I know that he's a busy man. I know he's got a lot going on at the moment. And we had, under 40 minutes of his time. But, nothing is ever solved. There's no action. There's no resolution. I can't do anything. It's a complex situation. all of the big words came out, and still nothing has happened. And what's more, really disappointing in this situation is that the housing minister at no point has come out to Inglewood. Not once has he come out to see this situation for himself, to meet tenants, to meet community members. Not once. Neither really has our local member for the area. Very limited interaction with helping with any of this stuff. So it is a real issue at the moment, and not just in Inglewood, but, everywhere, that the tenants of social housing have so many rights and so much protection that it's near impossible for any of them to be, either transferred, removed, or taken away. And I know that it then comes to the question is where they're supposed to go. If we move them from Inglewood, where are we supposed to put them? And I understand that in itself is a really complex thing, but why is that our problem? Why is that the community's problem? You've chosen to put someone here who wasn't suitable, and now you put the blame onto us as a community that we're the bad ones. And that's really, we've been made out to be the bad guys here, and we're not the bad guys. This government's the bad guys. They've not done any planning. They've put in terrible policy. They don't enforce their own policy. And then they leave it to the police and to the members of the community, who are the ones who have to pick up the pieces. And that's not fair.
Again, two questions from that what you shared. One around the eviction is that the more news articles I've read about this, every time there's a line from a spokesperson or the department, is that the department will always cite that the Residential Tenancies Act, in which eviction has to be done by a magistrate. That's the usual answer every time. Do you buy that, or is it that there's something else going on behind the scenes?
I think it's a really challenging position that magistrates are in. And I think that some magistrates don't live in the real world. So we get the 3 strikes, the tenant goes to court, and the magistrate's like, well, we don't want to put you on the street, so we're going to say, okay, you're on a good behaviour bond, or whatever that is, and then that person just goes back in. That's not solving a problem, because there's an issue here that no one's dealing with, and it's not the bad behaviour, it's not the screaming and yelling or the drinking and the drugs. These people have serious mental health issues, and that is not being addressed. This is the fundamental basis of majority of these issues. The mental health system in this state, and mostly around Australia, is completely broken, and no one's talking about it, and nothing's been done about it. Yeah, and all of this stems from that. You think about youth in jail, you think about all of these things. Putting people in jail is not going to solve their problems. Putting them back on the streets not going to solve their problems. There's a reason, and there's a heap of issues as to why they're in this situation in the first place. The government doesn't seem to be nutting that out and working that out and going back to the root causes of the situations for these people. And that is frustrating, because we just want everyone to get on with life and be happy and come and live in our neighbourhood and we welcome you with open arms. And so many people have, but we're also not going to lay down and let you walk all over us and bring our community, into disrepair. That's not going to happen.
When you mentioned that the housing minister has not visited the area, and the local member has not even come to the area again, it just reminded me of a very interesting story in Delhi. So just before the election, Delhi had an election in India recently, and there was a huge problem of the government not paying money to pick up rubbish from the municipal areas. So there was huge garbage mountains around every locality. So people, when they couldn't get anywhere, so just to make their voices heard, the people started picking up all that rubbish on their own, and they went to the chief minister's house and they put all the rubbish outside his door. It's like, this is what we face every day. Now you face it. But it was a big news. I don't know, we can't do it anywhere here. Australia is a different country, but very interesting how people can make their views or their pain heard to the ministers. So Anyway, one thing which I wanted to ask from the last discussion was that we deal with Department of Communities officials, and they just don't have just Inglewood. They have to manage n number of social housing people on wait list. How intimately, though, actually they know about the ground level issues, or are they just they have so many things? So this is okay. This is one of the other things. So they can't be too much involved in the issues that people are facing actually on the ground level.
Yeah, I mean, these government agencies would be completely understaffed. And when we look at, I think there's 23,000 people in WA on social housing waitlists at the moment. 7,000 of those are priority. That has grown from 4,000 to 7,000 in the last, I think, 18 months. That is a massive jump. And so these poor places would have such a huge backlog of work. They're probably under-resourced, they're probably undermanned, and they just don't have the ability to be able to follow up and do this work. And I think a lot of the time they probably think, I've got better things to be doing, and I'm sick of listening to these people whinge about the social housing tenants. And I get that it looks like that, but that's not fair. That's not fair. And that's not a democracy. That's just like, we're going to do whatever we want and you're going to have to deal with it. Like that's not the rules of Australia. And I feel like this government really is pushing its narrative onto that to say, well, we've made the decisions, we've made the policy, we have made the rules, and you guys just have to deal with it. And that's really not fair, because that doesn't work for the community members, and it's not helping the social people in social housing either. And it's just frustrating when you have people that are constantly doing the wrong thing, that have a roof over their heads, that are in and out of jail, but they get to keep their apartment while they're in jail, yet there's probably 10 mothers within a kilometre vicinity of where I'm sitting right now that are living in their car every night with their children because they don't have a place to live. And that's not fair when you have people who are constantly, and they know they're not doing the right thing, but there's no consequences, so they get away with it. I think the priorities of these departments are completely wrong, and I think that needs to be looked at. That really needs to be looked at. Who is the priority here? Is it a person who's come off the streets and is in need of, serious mental health treatment? Or is it a mum with a child? I know they're really hard decisions to make, but someone's got to make these decisions, and we need to see some action on this, because there's not enough at the moment. There's not enough houses to house people. There's not enough rentals. There's no rentals. And even if you can get a rental, most of these people can't afford a rental because they don't have the income to do that. So, this housing crisis that we have in Australia right now needs a massive shake-up. And it just needs some people to be looking at it from a different angle so that stuff can get done. People can get some roofs over their heads, and that kind of lowers the stress level of everyone. And when everyone's stressed like this, then these situations start to happen. People, start drinking and they start taking drugs. They start doing all of that because that's their coping mechanism to be able to cope with that really stressful environment. And then that obviously overflows into antisocial behaviour and all of those things, and they end up finding themselves in trouble. And it just goes back to repeat that cycle that's not being dealt with.
It is strange. So you said that the minister has not come to Inglewood, but I assume, and I've read through reports, that the residents, including you, have had an opportunity to go and meet him and talk to him and put your position in. And there was a word that you described the response as, whatever his response was, as cowardice.
Yes.
What exactly happened there, and what were you actually looking a response like? What were you expecting from him, and what did you actually get from him?
Yeah. So that time we went to Parliament. So we were invited into Parliament by the Shadow Housing Minister, and we sat up in the galley. There was a group of us from the community. We sat up in the galley and listened to question time. So the Shadow Minister was asking the Housing Minister specific questions related to Inglewood, why he hadn't been out, why after repeated requests from the community to meet with us or come out and see the complex and see what we were dealing with, he refused. And he was asked that question in question time, and as he does, he dances around the questions and he doesn't answer any of the questions. And he called it a political stunt that we were in the gallery that day, and he did agree to meet with us after the question time. And then when question time finished, he got out of there really quickly and then chose not to meet with us. And that was, and then we went into a press conference. And I did use the word cowardice because it is cowardice. You've created this situation and now you don't want to face it and you don't want to do anything about it. And you want to call our community NIMBYs, which means not in my backyard, which is completely not fair and completely not true, and put that blame onto us. It's very narcissistic behaviour, and it's completely unfair. We didn't cause this. We didn't create this. We aren't the ones that make that policy. We aren't the one that makes the decisions to do these things, yet we're the ones that are having to deal with this every day in our everyday lives. And it was hugely impactful for all of us. It's stressful. We wouldn't leave our homes. We didn't go on morning walks anymore. So yeah, that was really cowardice. And I stand by that quote because that was really disappointing. All you had to do was take 5 minutes out of your day to come and talk to us, which would have been enough. And you chose not to do that. And that was incredibly disappointing. So moving on from that day, about 2 weeks after that, I was contacted by his office, and we did get to make an appointment to go and meet with him, and we did. There was myself and another community member went along and had a one-on-one meeting with Mr. Carey. Yeah.
It is very disingenuous that first the minister doesn't want to talk to the community, and then he comes out with names or monikers like NIMBYs. It doesn't look good from the government, which has to work for everyone.
That's right.
We are also citizens. Yeah. We are also residents.
Yeah. It shows a real lack of empathy and it shows a real lack of emotional intelligence. When you can see this happening to people every day that you've created and you don't want to know about it. It's like, I don't want to know about it. I'm not going to do anything about it. And there's nothing that you can do about it. So yeah, that's probably been one of the hardest things to deal with.
You mentioned about being invited to the Parliament House by the opposition. How has your experience or what kind of support that you have got from the opposition to bring the issues that Inglewood faces to the media and to the Parliament and to the concerned stakeholders?
Yeah. So the opposition have been fantastic, and we reached out to them early days. We'd constantly reached out to the Housing Minister's office, and we constantly declined meetings, constantly declined contact. And so we thought, let's reach out to the opposition. So we reached out to the Shadow Housing Minister, and he's been fantastic. And he sat with us numerous times and listened to what our requests were, listened to the community on what their issues were and the things that we were finding to be the most challenging. And from that, he would often collate questions and then he would ask those in question time to the Minister of Housing, specifically on Inglewood, as to why this was being allowed. Why was this constant antisocial behaviour being allowed to go on for so long? People, breaking windows, smashing people's houses at night times, the screaming and the yelling, and it was just consistent. Yeah. So the Shadow Housing Minister was fantastic. And I think it's important to know that, these people are busy people, but for him to take time out and sit with the community and hear them, it speaks volumes to what the other side has not done. Because really all they had to do was have a meeting with us and listen to us. If they had done that, I don't think this situation would have been as bad as what it got to. And that's just incredibly disappointing. When we the taxpayers are paying your wages yet you won't even listen to our community concerns when they are serious, like serious concerns. That's it's unfortunate, and it just goes to show the lack of care that the politicians of this state have for its people.
So while you are managing, and not you, but the whole community itself, and everyone is trying to sort this out, the police is trying to sort this out, the communities is trying to sort this out, and then there is a news that there is going to be a new development of social housing in the Beaufort Street. Again, possibly no consultations and things. How does the community feels about, with one problem area, lesser number of people, we are already facing this. What's going to happen when the other project also becomes live?
Yeah. So that was a massive kick in the guts. You know, and not because of the building, that's fine. And, you know, I'm a big advocate to say that Inglewood needs growth. We need new apartments. We need more density in Inglewood, and we need to grow the population here. It's an incredible neighbourhood, and we absolutely need to grow the population here. I'm in complete agreement with that. But we need to do it the right way. And so, you know, about 6 months through, it was like June or something like that, there was the advert of a new development coming in. So it's going to be a 50 unit complex, 100% social housing. We could not believe it. We were like, how have we not learnt from what we've just been through? And here you are now saying, okay, by the way, we're going to build another 50 units, 400 metres down the road from 157. And the community went crazy. There was no consultation at all, and it basically just got dumped in our neighbourhood. So, and once again, disappointing, as the City of Stirling were not involved in that. The community was really disappointed and really concerned that, okay, up the road here, you've got 24 units. Look at the chaos that this has caused for our community. Now you're going to double that and put it 400 metres down the street. It was really sad, and it was really disappointing. So I guess what's come from that is that we asked the government if they could commit to it being, you know, a specific age group or gender of people. So they told us that it would be for over 55s. I think from memory, there's 46 single units and 4 two-bedroom units that were up the top. When they first lodged the application and the plans, that's what it was. It was 100% social housing, but it'll be over 55s, and it will be managed by an outside organisation. Originally, the first plans were that it would have a commercial businesses on the bottom, so like a cafe, maybe, you know, a doctor's surgery or something like that, and then the apartments would be built above it. And so we were okay with that. We were okay with that because we were like, okay, so there's some fundamental kind of like okayness about that. And then those plans changed 3 times. The commercial aspect of it was removed. So we were like, okay, that's a red flag. And then there was no commitment to it being over 55. So that was another red flag. And it just went from bad to worse, basically. And didn't matter what we did. They were like, no, this is going ahead. It doesn't matter whether you like it or not. So the final plans of that are that there's no commercial on it. It will be built basically on the street, very minimal parking, and the over 55 is not in that anymore. It's gone. So the government has lied to us. They basically told us what we wanted to hear to keep us quiet, and now that is about to go ahead. They're soon to turn the soil for that build. So we have obviously put in submissions because we're really unhappy with that result. But at this stage, it looks like it's going ahead, and it'll be a couple of years before it's built. But we really, really hope that safeguards are put in place to ensure that this is not a repeat of 157, because that would be devastating for our community. So we are hoping now that a company takes it that is going to be able to manage it correctly. So the issue, I think, with 157 is that it's just not being managed. There's no one going in and checking and really working with those tenants who have issues. And we really just hope that the new complex that's being built on Wood Street, which is 400 metres from 157, is able to have wraparound services provided to it, that there are people living on site that are caretakers that can help manage issues when they arise. And, we'll just give some stability of, fundamental stability to people that are living there, that it is going to be safe and that it is going to be good. I mean, our biggest issue for that new build is that when you house people in 100% social housing, a lot of those people have complex issues. But across the road from that new build is a pub and a bottle shop and a TAB. There is also a Coles across the road. It's on a really busy corner just down from a children's school crossing. The build is not far from one of the local primary schools, and it's in a really dangerous place. The construction of that's going to be a real nightmare. It's going to be a really dangerous road, part of the road of Beaufort Street when they start building there. But yeah, we're really concerned for the welfare of those people going in there because no planning once again has been done. And all of the concerns that we raised along with the City of Stirling and other members of the community fell on deaf ears. We took all of these complaints to the WAPC, and I'm pretty sure that decision to go ahead with that bill was made before that meeting even took place.
So we've talked about the tenants, we talked about the government and bureaucracy and things. There's one big section, and you mentioned about the commercial aspect of the community, which is the businesses. Inglewood is known for its vibrant strip of cafes and shops. How are the local business owners managing with all this, and how are they coping with the antisocial elements and the incidents and the police coming around, because it affects the business as well?
Yeah, this impacted businesses immensely. There was many businesses that were really impacted because customers weren't coming out. They're like, I'm not coming into Inglewood, it's not safe. And so they would be going somewhere else to get their hair cut or their nails done or get the computer fixed, go to the gym and all of those kind of things. So it was devastating for a lot of local businesses because they just weren't getting the traffic that they normally would. People wouldn't even come and park, in the car parks and stuff because they were really scared that they were going to get, assaulted or abused and all of those kind of things. So, there was a couple of stores that closed down and they moved somewhere else because they just couldn't put up with the stealing and the, smashing of their business glass windows every night. And just during the day, people lurking around and stuff like that. It was terrible. Yeah. And I think the businesses really came out in support with the community members because it was really affecting their businesses and their sales. And we're in an environment where anyone, running a small business right now, it's tough. It's tough anyway. And then to add that into the mix is just so unfair into an already struggling economy for a lot of those people. So, Inglewood's a great place. For the last 10 years, have had a Monday night market, a night food market. This year, that has not been reinstated and at this point isn't going ahead for the start of summer. And that has been really disappointing. At this stage, I'm not sure if that is because of the antisocial behaviour and the issues that were going on. But that's a real loss for our community because that's what brought us all together, and we've lost that now. Unfortunately, those markets were in very close proximity to 157. And I know at the end of last year, when all of this was happening, that the numbers for that market were down because people just they were scared and they didn't want to come into our community. And that's devastating. So, for the government to ignore us and not listen to us when these things are happening that they're creating, it's not fair. It's not fair.
Towards closing, we have discussed, I think, many parts of it. But if you still have to go back to the housing minister, because that's where all the decisions and responsibilities and powers sit. What would you like to tell him? Like, what would you like him to do actually, even now, for both housing projects?
I would like him to step out of his glass house that he lives in, because he doesn't live in the real world. And by ignoring us and not involving himself in a situation that he's created, it just goes to show how out of touch he is with reality. You know, when you create these problems, you have to face them and go and fix them. But he's not done any of that. And I feel like a lot of the ministers sitting in those portfolios have no idea how hard people are doing it right now, because they aren't out and about and they're not talking to people and they're not taking themselves out to see those things. So it's thoroughly disappointing that we've had no support from that minister and his office. And so if I had to say something, I'd say come down to Inglewood and meet with us and hear, from our community. I put together a community safety forum this time last week. We had that at our local hall. I invited the Housing Minister, our local member, Department of Housing, Department of Communities, the council and the police. And none of those people came. The Housing Minister didn't come. Our local member didn't come. This is the first-hand opportunity for them to come and listen to the issues that are happening on the ground right now from the mouths of the people living in it every day. And they chose not to do that. And that's disappointing, because they've been given so many options and chances to come and meet with us, but they've chosen not to do that on multiple occasions. So that tells me that they know the issues are happening, but they have their heads in the sand, and they would rather choose to ignore it than do something about it. And that's disappointing when that is your job, because anyone else in that position in a job, you probably wouldn't have a job at the end of the day, because you're not doing your job effectively and properly. And so, yeah, that's really what I would say. And I just say to him, when you're housing people into social housing, let's think about where those people have come from and take some part of empathy and think about, is this going to be beneficial for that person? And if it's not, then let's find them somewhere else to go. Maybe they're better off with family members. Maybe they're better off in another suburb. Maybe they're better off in foundation housing or something like that before we put them somewhere else. So I think there needs to be a whole conversation about that process, because that process doesn't work.
With those words, I would like to thank you for coming to the show. I know reliving these moments and reliving those stories, and you have to go back through all those experiences again, it might be very hard and frustrating, not just for you, but even for the community. They have to go through it every day. And the people who are going through this are the people who are the other tenants in the social housing itself. And my sense, what I get from this is that it's not about the social housing, but it's more of the management of it, around providing the wraparound services, thinking of this, talking to the community, so that these issues can be thought out and planned before the project is put in, instead of on the other side when these things happen and the community has to face all this. So, with those words, thank you again. It's a pleasure to have you, and please keep working. I send my best wishes that you get what the community wants from you and from the minister and everyone.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for listening to our story. And it's always great to share what's been happening here. And we'll keep fighting for not only for our community, but also for the safety and wellbeing of those tenants as well. Yeah.